just revisit that agenda for you. So data cleansing, big topic for everybody at the moment, certainly in relation to being busy so far this year. We've had people, everyone's work environment has changed, both physically and potentially in relation to priorities, etc. So we wanted to throw some ideas at you to potentially have some of the projects that may have been sitting in the sidelines, bringing those to the surface, and we'll outline 3 of those for you today. Also, the impact of the ACMA decision. So certainly for our Australian clients, that's been an issue, something that they've probably seen in the press, and we just want to understand exactly what went wrong with Woolworths and why ACMA felt they had to issue a fine. So we'll cover that, and then also look through the 20C update for Eloqua this year as well, so starting next month. So some things that you should be aware of. We're obviously recording today's session, and it will be heavily edited, I can assure you of that, and obviously delivered using On24, and no reflection on On24, more a reflection on me. So thank you for joining us. Okay, so a couple of questions were submitted. One from Kimberly in Cairns in Far North Queensland. She wants to know, do we have any recommendations to get contacts to fill in the missing details in their profiles, for incentives or ways to prompt them? Yeah, great question. One of the easiest ways to do this, Kimberly, is to probably look at it in the context of it being a journey and not so much a destination. Progressive profiling is one of the easiest ways to do that with Eloqua. The progressive profiling function is something that is best used when you build it into form templates, so that it's not something that you have to consciously think about every time you build out a form. If you actually have it built into your templates, you'll be in a much better position to have that happen automatically over time. Now, I noticed actually specifically on your website, you do have, or it was in a newsletter, I think you did invite people to complete some details or update their information if it was missing. And I think that's also a great way to do it. If you build that again into, maybe that's a great content block that you could build within different emails and have that dropped into different email assets as well. As for incentives, that's a hard one, right? Because you can't make everything a competition, because otherwise it just gets too crazy. But certainly in the past, we've seen organizations who will do very specific campaigns, maybe on an annual basis, looking to invite people to actually validate and check their details. So don't pitch it as something that you're asking them to give you more information. It's about validating and confirming the information that you actually have on file about that person at the moment. And most people feel somewhat inclined to, okay, well, I want to check that. I want to make sure they've got my details correct. And at the same time, invite them to obviously fill in any missing gaps in that process as well. So hopefully that helps and provides you with some thoughts. Another question from Kath in Sydney. So Kath says that she has an issue where sometimes the segment number will drop when it enters the canvas. So what is the impact of letting someone enter the canvas more than once, or letting someone receive the same email twice? So to the latter half of that question first, the default, as you know with Eloqua, is that people can only enter a campaign canvas once. And by default, Eloqua will never send the same email to the same person twice. So generally speaking, this is a great default, and it's a good default to use. And you probably want to have really good reasons to override that particular default. In relation to why the segment member number may drop when you add it to the canvas, there can be a whole range of reasons as to why that's the case. And I've actually had a bit of an email dialogue with Kath to try and understand a little bit more about her specific circumstances. And so we'll sort of talk about that one a little bit further. But some of the critical things to consider, if your segment is added to the canvas and it's a dynamic segment, for example, you're adding members continually until the campaign is deactivated, you'll generally see numbers change in that process. Also, using filters in your segment versus a static list, that'll also deliver constant changes to the segment numbers. So depending on the size of your database and the fields that you've used in order to identify those different people within the segment, those numbers will change constantly. So the fact that they do change is not necessarily a red flag. It's just the nature of your data being dynamic flowing between your source system into your segment and then potentially onto the canvas as well. But Kath, thank you for your email with those extra explanations, and we'll have a closer look at that and try and help you understand what's going on there exactly. My name is Derek Bell, and I'm the klutz driving the webinar for you today. Jason and Matt, who have been desperately helping me behind the scenes, thank you very much. They're also on the call today, so thanks again for joining us. All right, so let's take a look at this data cleansing and understanding. I think the critical thing that we need to understand if we're going to go down any sort of data cleansing path is to really get a solid idea and understand of our data architecture. And that might sound a little bit geeky. Potentially it is a bit geeky, but it's critical that we understand these things before we go too crazy with what we're trying to do. So let's take a step back and just have a look at how Eloqua manages your data and where that data can come from. So in this particular example, most data that we work with from an Eloqua point of view is about a one-to-one relationship. So Derek has a single contact with a single email address, and Derek has one first name, one surname, one company that he works for, one mobile phone number. These data points are all one-to-one. Now, in the CRM, that's normally the case. You can have duplicates, of course, as you are aware. But when that information comes into Eloqua, we use the email address as the unique identifier. So things like shared email addresses are problematic, and we'll talk a little bit more about that actually when we get to talk about our friends at Woolworths and what kind of went wrong in that scenario. Eloqua can manage the multiples for you though with things like custom objects. So in this particular example, we take those disparate people, we bring them all into the CRM. They've all got their own email addresses, for example. And then we integrate them and we bring them across. And so we bring those contacts or leads from the CRM platform into Eloqua, where there's a one-to-one relationship. But it's very likely, depending on your organization and how you do business, whether you're a membership-based organization, whether you're a university with students and other various cohorts, whether you're a business that has warranties that you provide on your products or services, or most organizations will deal with opportunities. These are all a one-to-many type of relationship. And so Eloqua is able to manage those for you using the unique email address against each individual to put against each warranty or each of the different contracts that you may have in place, or a person may have multiple memberships. If membership only lasts for 12 months, then over many years, there'll obviously be multiple memberships that the person will have with a start date and an end date. And so those sorts of things are managed in Eloqua using custom objects. And custom objects are a really cool part of Eloqua that helps you manage data and also manage unique aspects of data that you have and different things that you have stored against those individuals. And this will vary across all of you. I'm just having a quick look down the list as to who's with us today. So I can see from university points of view, you would have potentially custom objects that might hold the educational records of individuals, so different degrees, etc., that they've done over time. I can see people here from financial services, so it could be in relation to different insurance policies, investment strategies, all sorts of different portfolios that you may store against them. I can see medical research at pharmaceutical companies here on the line today. So it could be in relation to testing with different products, people's participation in pilot programs, all those sorts of fun things. So there's a whole range of ways that custom objects can be used in your instance of Eloqua, and often integrated with a third-party platform, whether it's the CRM or potentially a different type of system. So in universities, there might be a system that keeps all student records, etc. So it could be integrating with that, for example. But here's some examples here to give you an idea. So it could be recent purchase history. It could be, if you're a cable subscriber to a television platform, it could be different programming preferences. It could be promotional discount codes. It could be the performance of a franchisee. If you're running some sort of a business where you have channels that you're dealing with as franchisees, well, you can look after that information and any unique information. Or in some cases, it's just supplementary information. And we use one, for instance, at Marketing Cube that I like to call, I think it's just called random marketing. data, and we use that for a whole range of different things, but it's often bespoke requirements. It's information that doesn't need to go on the contact because it really doesn't have a life. It's not going to be forever the case. It's just very campaign specific type information. And the benefit of putting it onto a custom object is that we can bring that back into the platform as well through as a field merge, or to use to drive dynamic content as well. So essentially, at the end of the day, a custom object helps you supplement the standard contact and account data, but it's also hugely scalable. That's the great thing. So if scale is what you need, then that's what custom objects will help you do. Now, in the context of this discussion around data cleansing, custom objects are an important part of this whole process. You can use them to do a whole range of things. And as I say here, they're powerful, they're flexible, they're linked records, which enrich segmentation, your campaigns, and your programs by letting you build those assets with information not found on a contact field or an account field. But understanding the origin of the data and how clean that data is before it gets into the platform is pretty key. So let's dive in and have a look at 3 housekeeping tasks that you could start today. All right, first one. First thing to acknowledge is the importance of data, and I suppose that's really why I wanted to focus a little bit there on custom objects to sort of reiterate the importance of data. But I think this quote from the Northbridge Group really helps us appreciate the value of data and the value of the data that we're all sitting on as Eloqua users. And that would extend obviously to your CRM team and obviously to ERP and other backend systems and other data warehouses that you might be hosting as well. It's important to understand that before we dive in and potentially corrupt things or mess things up. We need to be clear about what we're doing and understand the impact of changes that we might potentially make. So the first point is to be clear about the source of truth. And so in most cases, from an Eloqua point of view, the CRM is generally the source of truth. You will have people who organically reach your Eloqua landing pages potentially and will come into the system or come into your business through Eloqua via a form submission. But it's likely the vast majority of people that are sitting in Eloqua are coming into Eloqua from a CRM platform or via manual uploads if you don't have CRM integrated with a specific platform. Managing the cleanliness of the data is an ongoing process, and I really wanted to make sure you understand and appreciate this is not a set and forget process. There are certainly some aspects that Eloqua can help you from an ongoing point of view, and there's certain programs that can be built to help wash data and cleanse that data. But having someone in the business like a data steward, someone who has the ability to look over Eloqua, the CRM, the data warehouse, an ERP platform, looking over all of those different platforms, that's going to give you a much better result. So let's have a look at some ways to manage data cleanliness. First one. Determine where data should be cleaned. Is it in the CRM or source system, or is it in Eloqua? So now how do you choose which one? Let me give you an example. So, and I'll show you one here in just a moment, in relation to the state field. So for it, not so much in New Zealand, but in Australia, when you're working on address data, state becomes a great way to segment. It geographically helps you figure things out so much easier. But if that data is not clean, it can become really difficult. Now, in our world where we're integrated to a CRM platform, if we're going to make those changes en masse, we really need to make those changes in the CRM platform and not within Eloqua, because we can make those changes in Eloqua, but the next time the integration kicks in, the CRM data will override and correct what is sitting in Eloqua. So those things need to be understood, and that's where your system administrator is probably a good person to talk to understand the flow of data between the various platforms. My encouragement to you would be to start with the fields that you use most frequently. Don't spend too much time focusing on a field that was last updated in 1945, right? Let's look at the fields that you're using on a frequent basis and get those as clean as possible and build a solid process to ensure they're as clean as possible moving forward. One of the ways that I've seen data get dirty over time is through poor use of forms. So if we're using forms and we're just doing save as, etc., and there may be something wrong in that particular form, in the way it's been built and the processing steps are not accurate, then that's going to mess up data, etc. So simply saving as a form can just often perpetuate the problem. So try and stay away from going to save as for your forms. You know, invest the time now, and this is a good project for now, is to get those forms in a state where you've got all the right templates that you need for forms and where processing steps are accurately configured to deliver the best possible result. Also, in the context of forms, where possible, try and use single select pick lists. The reason for that is because the data quality is going to be so much better. As soon as you enter a free text field, and sometimes a free text field is perfect, you just simply need it in order for it to function. However, sometimes it can be a bit of a mess. So certainly if you're capturing an address, for instance, you want to avoid a free text field because in Australia, for example, some people may write New South Wales, others might write NSW, some may do N.S.W. So, there's a range of mistakes that can be easily made, which can impact the quality of your data. In the context of our friends at Oracle Sales Cloud, for example, we know that in their data model, when they look at their country list, while it displays as Australia, the actual data value is AU. And so Oracle uses 2-letter country codes for the value of all of its countries or country lists that you see within the platform. And so we need to be aware of that as we're moving data between Oracle Sales Cloud, the CRM platform, and between Eloqua. Just one example. The field population function within Eloqua is a great way to understand what's going on and to actually see very clearly what's going on. So I want to show you how to get to those screens so you can see that information. Now, it will depend on your level of access. Certainly the administrators can see this information, but you may need to talk to your administrator if you can't see the following screens. So the beauty of this part of Eloqua is it really helps you identify data quality, and you can see immediately if there are issues. So by accessing the settings area, you arrive here at the back end of Eloqua, so to speak, and on the left-hand side there you can see Manage Fields and Views. Once you access fields and views, I've just, as an example, have searched for the state field. So this is our state field that you can see. And at the bottom of the screen there, you can see the view button, which is to view the field population details. So I'm kind of opening the kimono a little bit here. Okay, so of the field in Eloqua, in our instance of Eloqua that is called state AU, this is the quality of the data that's sitting in there. Now, immediately you can see some potential issues, right? So we can see halfway down there, somehow we have 15 contacts with the number 1 sitting in their state field. Okay, clearly a problem. USA is a country, not a state. Illinois, Texas, Massachusetts, Ontario, that's all fine. That's our friends in New Zealand. Outside Australia, that's probably an old form that I need to revisit. So how do I then go about fixing that? Well, you can actually fix it directly from here, but again, it will depend on your integration as to what actually happens with that information. So what I typically do here is I go off to segments. I will create a segment focusing on the state field, and I say to Eloqua, give me all contacts where the value in the state field is the number 1. And that will then bring back those 15 individual contacts. And then what I probably also should be doing is a little bit of forensic work to try and backtrack and find out where that number 1 came from. Is it from a form that might have been incorrectly configured? Has it come through from the CRM for some reason? Is it a CRM data entry issue? So I want to do a little bit of forensics to go through that cleansing process to understand what's going on. So that particular function within Eloqua, fields and views, and looking to identify the field population is a really helpful tool to help you understand the quality of the data that you've got in the platform. Okay, number 2, managing your contact database. So From a cleansing point of view, there's also commercial impact here as well. From a commercial point of view, there's also incentive for you to make sure that you remove a lot of these contacts that you can't talk to, specifically those who are globally unsubscribed and those who are configured as a hard bounce back. This is one of the easiest things to do within Eloqua. It's certainly not difficult. I find the easiest way to do it is to create 2 segments. The reason I create 2 segments is it just gives me 2 very clear lists of information to work with. And it can look as simple as this. So this is probably one of the easiest segments you'll ever build. It's simply, I call mine marked as a hard bounce back. You can see at the moment there are 58 contacts who meet the criteria and have been flagged as a hard bounce back. And so by clicking on View Contacts, I can then export that information. And again, in our world, because of the integration with the CRM platform, I actually have a view configured there that includes the CRM IDs. So I'm able to take that list. I then go straight into the CRM. I upload that information to the CRM. We have a few fields in the CRM. One is called Do Not Sync to Eloqua. And I also update the lead source most recent to be marked as a hard bounce back. So that way the CRM user can see that this particular email account appears to have been invalid, as in it's a hard bounce back. So it's good that they see that information from that point of view. Now, by ticking that box in our CRM platform, we've told Eloqua to then ignore any contacts or leads within the CRM where that checkbox is ticked. So once that's done, I then bring that information back into Eloqua, and then I then delete those 58 contacts from Eloqua. So that's looking at how to manage the hard bounce backs. So we don't want to delete from the CRM. Generally, that's a best practice approach. You never want to delete anything from the CRM. We just simply want to update the information for the CRM user so they can see what's going on. The other side of the coin is unsubscribe. So you can see here now a slightly different filter. All the filters are available from here on the right-hand side, and we've configured it to be from a date parameter point of view as of now. And so these are 1,300 or so people who are globally unsubscribed. And again, same sort of process. Eloqua can't talk to them, so there's no reason they need to be in Eloqua. All they're doing is inflating our overall contact count. And it's certainly from a commercial point of view, it makes more sense to get those out of Eloqua. So same process again, back into the CRM platform, upload them, flag them as globally unsubscribed or opted out. Do not contact, depending on how your system is configured. And again, do not sync to Eloqua. And so then once that's done, then we delete them from Eloqua. Now, how often should you do this? Look, it really depends probably on the size of your database. At an absolute minimum, you want to do it once a year, usually a month or so, or a couple of months before Oracle are chasing you for renewals. But from a best practice point of view, it literally, once you've got it organized and you've got everything lined up that you need, it may take you no more than an hour to complete. I mean, when I do it in our system, it probably takes me about half an hour. That's about it. I'm just factoring in some of you have much larger databases than we do, so it might take a little bit longer for some of those things. So that's a very simple process. If you need help with that one, please give us a call. Contact us. We can certainly help you set up some of these views and these segments that make it easy to identify these people that should be removed. And if there are integration enhancements that need to be made, again, that can be easily accommodated. So please let us know and we can help you with that one. Now, the next one is kind of a segue into the next topic of today's webinar, but it's about your opt-out process. And this one certainly came to the fore in relation to the ACMA ruling in the context of Woolworths. But we've also had a few clients who have, as a result of that, wanted to have a close look and better understand their own opt-out process. My suggestion to you, and this literally is something that you probably want to do on a fairly regular basis. By regular, I mean maybe it's once a quarter or so, but you need to be familiar with this process, okay? You need to go through the process. You obviously would be sending yourself test emails from time to time. So go through that process, click on the link in the footer of the email, unsubscribe yourself, visit your preference center. Does it still make sense? When was the last time you looked at it? Was it built 3-4 years ago and no one's touched it since, and everyone just kind of assumes that it's working away in the background, which I'm sure it is, that's fine. But could it be improved and could it be enhanced? Yeah, the answer is quite possibly yes. So make a diary note. That's probably the easiest way to do it. Just set it up for once a quarter or once every 6 months to go through that opt-out process yourself. The key thing to understand, and this is just an example from Marketing Cube's emails, that you'll see at the very bottom here, we have click here to unsubscribe or manage your subscriptions. And that information, those two links actually take you to the exact same page. We're just wanting to try and diminish the focus on the word unsubscribe, but that's fine. People can unsubscribe should they go to that page or opt out, etc. So you want to make sure that's clear. So do that on your emails, have a look at those, make sure that every footer actually has those links in place. And then once you get to the next area, you want to make sure that you go back into Eloqua. Once you've unsubscribed yourself, make sure you go back into Eloqua, locate your contact, and then just resubscribe yourself. So when you come back in, instead of saying subscribe globally, it will say unsubscribe globally. And I think it has a big red circle with a line through it. You can just simply press on the button and that will resubscribe your contact. So everything goes back to as it should be. Something to think about from the point of view of this process and on an ongoing basis is that it's easy you can go part way and then you forget to come in and do this. And so then you're going to spend the next few weeks not getting any emails and you'll be wondering why. So just make sure you come back here and resubscribe yourself. Okay, so we have a question from Malcolm. He says, could you build a program to remove those unsubscribes and hard bounce segments? The ability to delete contacts and remove contacts from Eloqua, Malcolm, is by design not the easiest. Well, when I say not the easiest, you have to identify the group to begin with. You then need to export those people out to Excel. And then in order to delete them from Eloqua, you then need to import them back into Eloqua. But the reason for the import is to delete them. The reason for that is that the commercial value of your contacts is obviously extremely high. And so what Eloqua has done by design is not make it brain dead easy to simply delete contacts from the platform. So, I mean, there's no way that anyone could accidentally do what I just described. So my understanding is that no, we can't create a program to delete them from the platform. That process still does require some manual input for commercial reasons and the value of contacts typically for most Eloqua customers. But you can certainly do things to make the integration smarter between your source systems and Eloqua, because we don't want those people necessarily flooding back into Eloqua for the same commercial reasons. But we can explore that further specifically based on your instance, if you like, and understand and create a process that makes it as easy as possible to go through that process. So let's have a look at the ACMA decision. So for those people outside of Australia who are joining us or watching the replay today, the ACMA is the Australian Consumer Media Authority. I think, the Australian Communications and Media Authority. Sorry to get I hate acronyms. But anyway, that's ACMA. And so they're a government department that regulates the communications and media industry. And certainly from a Spam Act point of view, that falls into their remit to enforce the Spam Act. And in this case, ACMA are the ones who have issued the fine to Woolworths, which is Australia's largest supermarket, grocery store. So this was an excerpt I've taken from the Sydney Morning Herald, one of our larger newspapers here in Australia. And there it is, the Australian Communications and Media Authority. So groceries giant Woolworths has been slapped with a record fine after breaching spam laws more than 5 million times and ignoring repeated consumer requests to unsubscribe from its marketing mailing lists. Now, most of us in this industry, and most people on this call would read that and go, well, hang on a minute. I mean, if someone clicks on unsubscribe, the platform just takes care of it. That's how they're all built the same. Doesn't matter if you're using MailChimp or Eloqua, right? They have a function. You click on unsubscribe and that's it. Game over. They've opted out. So what went wrong? So ACMA had found the supermarket giant unlawfully spammed more than 1.2 million customers between October 2018 and July 2019. So what's interesting is to look at the response from Woolworths, and they articulated this, and this was quoted again in the Sydney Morning Herald article. And I apologize for the very slow loading. I'll blame PowerPoint for this one. So we respect the right of our rewards members, so specifically the fine impacted, I believe it was referred to as Woolworths X, which is the online side of the business, and it's the rewards members. So I get these emails, like many of you on the call, you probably get the same emails, right? So we respect the right of our rewards members to choose how and when we communicate with them, and apologize for failing to act on all unsubscribe requests as required under the law. The really interesting point is that last one, under the law, says Amanda Bardwell, Managing Director of Woolies X, the supermarket chain's digital e-commerce and customer services arm. This is the key part here. So subsequent breaches occurred because we continued sending communications to email addresses shared by multiple rewards members where only one member had made an unsubscribe request. Okay, so let's play that out. So we've got a couple at home, they share an email address, like most of you on the phone or on the phone, where am I, 1945? Most of you on the webinar today, like why on earth would you share an email address? But that's okay, we know people share email addresses. The challenge is that Woolworths had clearly set up a data model within their source system that showed couple A and individual A and individual B as two separate profiles with two separate sets of preferences, but with the same email address. Now, this is not uncommon, and there are those of you on the call today who possibly have this exact same model within your own CRM platforms. The challenge is, though, as far as ACMA is concerned, and in relation to the Spam Act, that if person A globally unsubscribes or opts out of communications with that particular email address, it means that anybody else using that email address, regardless of it being one other person or 25 other people or 100 other people, everybody is opted out. That's the key thing to take away from this particular issue and $1 million fine that has been issued to our friends at Woolworths. Now, as you know, Eloqua will only allow a single email address to be brought into the platform. It's impossible for you to enter multiple email addresses or multiple identical email addresses into the platform. And by design, that's a great thing. And it shows that it's clearly in line with Australia's Spam Act and probably similar Spam Acts around the world, depending on your jurisdiction and where you are. Now, look, I'd encourage you to visit our blog. We've gone through this in a little bit more detail on our blog, and you can see that information and read that a little bit further. But 5 top tips, essentially. You really need to go and have a chat to your in-house counsel and to understand what the obligations are. And it may well be that you might need some external assistance. And I should emphasize that Marketing Cube is not in a position to provide any legal advice. I think we have we have a couple of law firms on the call today, and so I'm certainly not in a position to offer any advice from a legal point of view, nor is the business. So we would encourage you to do that internally. Also, understand your current opt-in and opt-out process. And the opt-in process is as important to understand as the opt-out process. So at the point of people filling in a form and entering into your database, is it absolutely clear to that individual that they are in fact opting in? Is it clear to them that you will now be adding them to mailing lists and will be communicating with them based on topics, etc., that you believe are of interest to them based on their profile and that sort of information? Eloqua provides you everything you need to do this properly, to do it lawfully, and to deliver a great experience. Email groups is a powerful way to do that. And email groups really help you manage that subscription level below the opt-out and opt-in process. So globally unsubscribe or globally subscribe, from an Eloqua Speak point of view, think of that as opt-in and opt-out. Same thing, right, at the highest level. Underneath that, though, you then have email groups to help manage individual subscriptions. So it could be each newsletter has its own email group. It could be that events is an email group that people can subscribe to. It manages that for you beautifully, and there's no room for error, which is even better. So we would also encourage you to have a think and familiarize yourself with the European Union's Gdpr legislation. It's our opinion that that type of legislation is not too far away for the Australian market, and we would expect that you'll see it within a few years. Then probably point number 5 is also from a risk management point of view, you need to potentially try and understand how many shared email addresses that you currently have in place. Now, if you've done some funky designs using custom objects to try and manage shared email addresses from a source system, that's one thing, but it's probably best to go back to your source system, in most cases the CRM, and identify how many contacts you have that are using the same email address. And then as a business, you need to think that through as to how you're going to manage that whole process. All right. Next step, highlights for 20C, due in the middle of August, so next month. These are the highlights. We've got just enough time to go through these. Program Canvas improvements. So for those of you that have been using Eloqua for quite some time, you'll be familiar with the Program Builder and also Program Canvas. So the nice thing is you can now move people directly to the canvas from the Program Builder. So yeah, if you do have a lot of programs that you've been using, the ability to now have people flow from the Program Builder to the Program Canvas is a great thing. Now the video embedding, you've noticed last release, I think it was, we all had access now to adding YouTube and Vimeo videos directly to the Eloqua landing pages. As of August, you'll be able to do a similar thing, which is adding a preview block to emails as well. So we can't watch the video in the actual email, but when you use the video block in an email, whatever the preview slide is that has been created on that video in YouTube or Vimeo will be displayed on the email. So that just makes that process a lot easier. Means you don't have to upload JPEGs, etc., screenshots from YouTube, etc. So that should speed things up. There has been additional enhancements to content blocks moving on from the release last time. So you can now lock blocks. It seems like it's hard to say, doesn't it? You can lock blocks, so only certain components can be edited. You can also add descriptions to them, which is good, helps the end user community have a bit more clarity around what they should be using them for, and use multi-row grouping. So that comes down to the ability when you're actually designing them and etc. You can have multiple rows, etc. So you'll see it once you get to August and we can start playing. You'll see the benefit of that. Probably more so for the administrators. SSL certificate management is now generally available. It was previously limited to customers who paid for SSL certificate self-purchase as an add-on, but that is now generally available. So again, more so for the administrator in that case. A few other things that have been added. This is the preview function that we just talked about. Also emailing HTML exports. So if you've got CSS, etc., that's also now custom CSS is included when exporting to HTML, and also headers and footers if you're exporting emails. That wasn't the case previously, but that is the case now. General enhancements, I'm really not sure how to pitch this one other than to say that Eloqua no longer uses the term whitelist. It's now referred to as an allow list. Next enhancement. Apps. This is quite helpful. So for those of you that are using apps on a regular basis, sometimes you'll notice on the campaign canvas, people can sometimes get stuck at a particular app for whatever reason. And you can click on the number, the window pops up, and you can then scroll along to the far right-hand side where you'll see an error message. And those error messages, well, they're a little bit vague. There's been a lot of work done, which is exciting, and there's more coming. And what you see on the screen here now are far more detailed explanations as to what's going on in the process and why that individual is potentially stuck where they are, or something needs to be actioned and corrected. So this is great news. It's just a lot more detail to help you better identify what the problem is so that you can fix it. So that's good news. And apparently there's more coming as well, so more updated details. If you're using the LinkedIn Campaign Manager app, just simply be aware that when the audiences that you select now will only show audiences that you're actually entitled to see or to add or remove from within Eloqua. That'll be based on user profile, I would imagine, and also the user profile that you've put into LinkedIn. So if you're creating things in LinkedIn under your LinkedIn ID, we need to make sure that your credentials are also sitting in Eloqua so that you can see that same information. The Oracle Sales Cloud integration app has gone through a name change, essentially. No super changes in functionality. There's already a ton in there, so that's good news. But it's now referred to as the Oracle Eloqua CX Sales Integration app. So for those of you using Oracle, which are a few on the call today, it just simply means if you're trying to search for something and to find it, you need to refer to it as the Oracle Eloqua CX Sales Integration app. The key thing is CX Sales. If you can remember CX Sales, you'll be able to find that through the search functions. Salesforce App has also had some updates as well. So for those customers, and I can see we have a few Salesforce CRM customers with us today. This one is quite exciting. So contact an account, the last modified by the CRM field, is now also available within the app. That will help with a whole range of different things, and it's probably it'll be a very nuanced benefit for everybody for different reasons. Also, the contact, lead, and account objects, if the length of the mailing address is expected to exceed 100 characters, the app will actually split the mailing addresses into Eloqua. Eloqua already has these fields built. It's address 2 and address 3. Probably not a huge deal that it splits them out because we're not really obviously using Eloqua to generate mailing lists, as in snail mail lists. That's really the domain of the CRM, so to speak. But if you are bringing that data into Eloqua, it's just going to make that a little bit cleaner in the way that it manages those longer addresses. Also in the Salesforce app, you can now choose whether you want Eloqua to update Eloqua object fields with the new value, even if the new value is blank. That one's actually kind of cool. For anyone that's been doing any data cleansing or working to get data clean between their Salesforce CRM instance and Eloqua, that's actually kind of cool. That will be quite helpful. The next one is a little bit off my radar, but again, if you're looking to map Salesforce Boolean data types to Eloqua integer fields, well, welcome to August. You're going to be excited. You can do that. And then this one also is now generally available. I think we talked about this last time, and I know if I have a quick look as to who's with us. Yes, there's a couple of people on the call who will be excited about this last one as well. So what that means is if an individual lead or contact within the CRM platform, in this case Salesforce, if the email address is updated, what used to happen, or changed, I should say, is changed. What used to happen is that Eloqua would then create a new contact for the person with that new email address. What happens now is that Eloqua does some analysis and says, okay, hang on a minute, yes, that's a new email address, but it's actually an existing person or human that we have sitting in Eloqua. It's just the email address that has changed. So it'll manage that process quite nicely. So that's now generally available, which is great news. Sales tools, if you're using the different sales tools, Engage, there's a couple of people on the call who I can see, are using Engage. A couple of expanded features there, so I won't dive into these, but give me a buzz and we can actually walk through those with you. Again, for the more geeky folks amongst us, but these are good things that help enhance the overall security of landing pages. Apparently it has to do with things like, for instance, the ability to securely have, for instance, a landing page present maybe a pop-up form, and then without the page having to reload, the form can be complete and you can continue navigating through that particular page. In the past, what had to happen was, and it was all driven by security, was that the form would pop up, you would submit, and then you'd have to refresh to a confirmation page of some sort. So we understand that that's just one example, by the way. There are multiple reasons as to why this is helpful, but that's just one example of why some of these features and the differences that you'll be able to do. Our support team will be able to advise you in a bit more detail and potentially look at altering how some things are done on some of your existing pages. And then finally, towards the end of today's session, just a reminder to you in relation to your choice between Chrome and Firefox, that either of these two browsers will give you a great result. Both are rated as A, best choice, and looking at version 80 of Chrome and version 75 of Firefox. So I encourage you to just have a look at that and make sure you're as up to date as possible with those. So at that point, I would love to turn over to Q&A and to see if anybody has any questions. So I'm happy to stay on the line here for a little bit longer for anybody that does have any questions, but we've just hit 12:02. Thank you very much for joining us today. But if you do have any questions, happy to stay on the line. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. I hope what we've outlined was helpful, and we'll have additional information available on our blog in the coming days, probably by early next week. Thank you very much, guys, and have a great day.